and Tatsuo wanted to have a show that appealed to an older age group. Ippei Kuri remembers.
When we made up our minds about it, planning was started about 10 months before it went on the air. Then the production started about 3 or 4 months before.
This would have been around the end of 1971 and the very beginning of 1972. A core group of creative types was brought in to help develop this new series. Tatsuo had a rough idea of what he wanted to accomplish, and he knew who would be able to help him see his vision realized. Included in the group were his brother Ippei Kuri, Hisayuki Toriumi, who had worked on Speed Racer, and writers and planners Jinzo Toriumi, Akiyoshi Sakai, and Satoshi Suyama. These 6 were the main people who would give this new production its motivation and goals. Tatsuo's initial idea was for a mechanical action-type show, possibly in the same vein as Tezuka Productions' Tetsujin Nijuhachi Go, called Gigantor in America. But he also began to toy with the idea of exploring the relationship between mankind and science in a more realistic style. Ippei Kuri recalls,
At one of the manga publishers where we worked, the most popular story was one about a ninja adventure. So we came up with the idea of joining ninja with science to create something new.
Also, Ippei and Tatsuo's love for their American superhero comics had not diminished, and they desired to bring something similar to the youngsters of Japan. Their ninjas, for it was decided from the very beginning that the show would focus on a team of heroes rather than an individual, would be in bright, colorful, heroic costumes. They'd be larger than life, and so would their adventures. The 3 main planners of this series, Toriumi, Sakai, and Suyama, went away for a secluded weekend at a countryside inn so that they could focus on their planning. There they recorded their conversations, which centered on the plotting of the new series in general and its first 3 episodes in particular. They decided that they should write with science in mind, that it could almost be an educational program, yet with a satirical bend. Jinzo Toriumi was particularly in favor of the evil in the show almost appearing as its own character, a relentless force from space, with the only good people being the 5 heroes. Other important concepts were hashed out in these initial discussions, including the attention to the problems of pollution in Japan at the time. A few franchises like Godzilla vs. Megalon in particular, had tackled stories about the evils of pollution, as it was very much on the minds of people in Japan. Tatsuo and his staff thought it would be a good way to help tie in the scientific aspects they wanted to focus on. Their good guys would be using scientific discoveries and advancements for the benefit of mankind, while their enemies would use the same knowledge for evil and destruction. It would be a program that would show how technology must be used with caution and discretion. A pretty weighty subject as an underlying message for a children's adventure show. To ensure scientific realism, or at least plausibility with the material, math teacher Rei Kozumi was brought in to act as the show's science fiction consultant. It was his job to come up with scientific explanations for the technologies that would make them possible. He had a background in theoretical science and was featured in early publications about the types of technology the future might bring. So he was a perfect addition to add to the show's credibility. A lot of the story and plot elements for the new show were borrowed, adapted, and updated from earlier shows. This included the team aspect from Boy Ninja Squad Moonlight, the missing relative angle from Speed Racer, the orphaned youngster of Kurenai Sanshiro, and the amazing realistic quality of animation and action from Decision. Even the comedic angle in so many of Tatsunoko's early shows would be incorporated to a degree. After these early initial discussions, Jinzo Toriumi sat down to write a treatment for the show. His first drafts called the new show Science Ninja Squad 5, and many of the names and terms and themes that would make it through to the final planning were introduced at this stage. The initial names of the 5 leads were Ken Hayabusa, Jun Shiratori, Joe Takano, Ryu Washio, and Jinpei Subakuro. Interestingly, most of these last names are closely associated with types of birds, proving that this influence was present from the beginning. The Science Ninja Squad were assisted by Dr. Kozaburo Nambu and Red Impulse, and they were hampered by a main villain named Berg Katse. At this early stage, the Science Ninja Squad was seen as a type of special police force, who operated from the Phoenix headquarters. They would be dispatched whenever needed on board a special disc-shaped giant submarine that could also fly, also called the Phoenix. While the team could rely upon their ninja training for hand-to-hand combat, they were also to have a selection of advanced technological implements at their disposal. Any special device they needed would be produced at the Phoenix headquarters. Early design and sketches were done of the main leader of the team, and at least a couple were done of the main villain. Tatsuo headed the character design team and came up with the basic look of the helmets and capes for the team. Ippei Kuri recalls,
"We tried putting on wings and various things, but nothing was as satisfying as capes. We also introduced the bird elements into the heroes' helmets."
Kuri himself did additional character designs and helped flesh out the look of the team. The planners had initially wanted to focus most of the stories on Ken, Jun, and Jinpei, with Joe and Rue on hand as background characters. However, Joe turned out to be far more dynamic and interesting to the writers, so naturally his character became a greater focus, and Jinpei was pushed out of the spotlight to an extent. The original rank lineup for the team was Ken, Jun, Joe, Rue, and Jinpei. But that got changed around as the writers started to get a better feel for the characters they were putting together. The name of the show was also something that took some time to settle on. In addition to the Science Ninja Squad 5 name, there was also Secret 7, Bird Mecha Man, Shadow, which appears on early model sheet drawings, and what was probably the closest to becoming the series name until Fate stepped in, Birdman. Reportedly, when the first episode's film canister was delivered, it was still labeled Birdman, as that was the strongest contender for a long while. But the final name for Production 21 was arrived at during a meeting between Tatsunoko and their advertising agency, Yomiko. Ippei Kuri remembers the day.
Kanshi Matsuyama was Yomiko's managing director at the time. The name came about as a joke he made to ease the tension one day. He started half-jokingly saying things like, "How about gotcha, Gatchamanan, and Gatchaman, and finally, Gatchaman." Gotcha sort of brings to mind the image of dragonflies coupling, and we thought it was funny initially, but not very good. But someone said wait, and we thought about it a little more. Gotcha also brings to mind the sound of machines uniting, which would be something the Gatchaman production would be associated with. Ideally, we wanted a word that would sound cool when it was said. Also, at the same time, there was a show called Combat that had an eye catch where a foreigner said, "Combat!" We liked the sound of that and considered that the character of the word Gatchaman would sound good for an eye catch.
By now, the final planning and description notes were being completed and production was about ready to begin on Science Ninja Team Gatchaman. The visual appearance of the characters was pretty well set at this point, except for one more last-minute change. Bird Katse's initial design was scrapped in favor of one drawn by uncredited character designer Yoshitaka Amano, in later years famed for his work on the Final Fantasy game series. The previous design for Katse would not be wasted though, as it was used for the enemy captain in the first 2 episodes of Gatchaman. Amano joined Tatsunoko around the age of 15 after impressing the staff with his natural drawing ability. He wasn't hired right away, but he was allowed to intern on Speed Racer and other projects. He shared a deep love of American comic books with the Yoshida brothers and kept scrapbooks of his favorite poses, which he would sketch and try to mimic. Amano was allowed to try his hand at several character designs for Gatchaman, and although he was not credited for them on screen, 3 of his attempts were used in the final show: Jun, Dr. Nambu, and Berg Katse, in and out of disguise. One of the other main creative personnel that Tatsuo brought in early on the project was animator Sadao Miyamoto. He had been working at Mushi Productions, where he did character designs and art direction for Ribbon no Kishi, Princess Knight, one of the first shoujo anime ever made. Shoujo is a term used to describe those manga, anime, and other merchandise aimed specifically at preteen to teenage girls. Tatsuo was able to lure him away by giving him a job at Tatsunoko Productions as an animation director. The final planning for the series laid out ideas and conventions that would make for a rousing and exciting show. not to mention set the standard for countless live-action Sentai shows in the very near future. Sentai shows are science fiction shows that center around a team of heroes who fight evil. The Sentai genre of programming is still going on to this day, with many of the themes and ideas seemingly lifted straight from Gatchaman's example. The story features a team of 5 youngsters who each transform into special suits for combat. They each have a specific individual weapon to use. Each team member also has their own vehicle, 4 of which can also transform. When the vehicles are brought together, they have even more combat capabilities, and the means to utilize a final ultimate weapon if need be. The team members' uniforms are all similar, but are rendered in distinct colors unique to each person. Gatchaman set the character archetypes as well, from the passionate and headstrong leader Ken, the nihilistic and impulsive Joe, the sensitive yet strong Jun, and the comedic and dependent Jinpei, to the big-hearted and brave Rue. The evil Galactor sets another archetype, that of an organization bent on conquering Earth for their own purposes, which are never really clear. They are led by 2 main leaders, with hordes of faceless captains and soldiers that can be thrown at the ninja team members. Some of these concepts may have been around before, but it took the creators of Gatchaman to organize everything into a coherent storyline and a soon-to-be trend-setting program. Everything was prepared and ready to go. The next step would be the actual production of an episode to see how it would work. Science Ninja Team Gatchaman was poised to hit the airwaves. Unlike many of Tatsunoko Productions' other early series and series pitches, Gatchaman did not have a traditional pilot or any known animation tests done. The program went directly from the planning stages into the production of the first episode. The exact reasoning for this is unclear. Perhaps there were time constraints, or maybe everyone was confident it would work right from the start. Ippei Kuri remembers,
There was no pilot film made. We presented various drawn pictures and scenes to help introduce the characters.
Clearly, these were enough to sell the show to the sponsors and get it going. But this move was especially odd considering the importance that Tatsuo placed on the project. Sadao Miyamoto took on the task of animating the footage that would be used in the opening credits. He wanted to make certain the show started off with the correct